Have you ever felt a gravity that doesn't belong to this world? It's not the force that holds you to the earth, but a deeper, more insistent pull that seems to emanate from the very marrow of your bones, urging you to simply lie down, to be still, to surrender the fight. It's a weariness so profound that the simple act of opening your eyes in the morning feels like lifting a 1,000-pound weight. If you know this feeling, then you know the soul's most ancient language. My name is Elias, and for years, I was a master of motion. I was an architect, a builder of things that defied gravity, structures of steel and glass that reached for the sky. My life was a blueprint of relentless productivity. My calendar was a fortress, each hour a brick laid with perfect precision. I rose before the sun, fueled by coffee and ambition, and I didn't stop until long after it had set. I worshipped at the altar of doing, believing that movement was the only true sign of life. Laziness in my mind was not just a weakness, it was a moral failing. And then, the gravity found me. It started subtly. Desire to hit the snooze button one more time. An afternoon slump that felt less like a dip and more like a plunge. I dismissed it, of course. I drank more coffee, pushed harder, scheduled more meetings. I told myself I was just tired, that I needed a vacation. But the feeling grew, becoming a constant companion, a heavy cloak I couldn't shrug off. Soon, waking up was a negotiation. My mind would scream, "Get up! The world is waiting. You have deadlines." But my body, my very essence, would whisper a single defiant word. No. This wasn't just tiredness. This was a profound, cellular refusal to participate. The heaviness had won. I began to see it as a personal failure, a defect in my character. I was broken. I was lazy. I was weak. The modern world, the world I had so eagerly helped to build, has no patience for stillness. It sees a fallow field and calls it barren, forgetting the deep invisible work happening beneath the soil. It sees a body at rest and calls it unproductive, ignoring the silent alchemy of the soul. My psyche, however, did not care for the demands of my calendar or the expectations of my clients. It adheres to a much older, more formidable law, the law of truth. And the truth was, the life I had so meticulously constructed was a magnificent lie. It was a beautiful skyscraper built on a fault line. My soul knew this long before my conscious mind was willing to admit it, and so it did the only thing it could. It began to slow me down. It began to pull the plug on the machine. That desire to lie down, to retreat from the world under the sanctuary of a blanket, was not the end of my life. It was the first sign of a radical inner transformation. It was the soul pulling its energy inward, not to let it die, but to speak. It was whispering through the quiet ache in my limbs, sending messages my frantic, conscious mind had been ignoring for years. I was in the deep winter of my being, a necessary precursor to any spring. I was inside the cocoon, and the messy, painful work of metamorphosis had begun. For weeks, I resisted. I fought the heaviness with every ounce of my remaining will. But it was like wrestling with the tide. Eventually, exhausted and defeated, I surrendered. I called in sick. I canceled my meetings. I lay down. And in that stillness, something extraordinary happened. The initial wave of guilt and self-loathing slowly receded, and in its place, a strange quiet descended. It was not an empty quiet. It was filled with a presence I hadn't felt in years. My own. My body, this vessel I had treated as a mere vehicle for my ambition, finally had the floor. It began to speak to me in its native tongue, the language of sensation, of impulse, of profound fatigue. This resistance to movement, I realized, was not a malfunction. It was a silent rebellion. It was a protest against a life that no longer fit, a life that demanded constant performance while my inner world starved for authenticity. The heaviness was a signpost, pointing directly to the profound misalignment between the life I was living and the life my soul craved. In that quiet room, I began to understand that stillness is not decay. It is a spiritual incubation period. It is a sacred pause where the subconscious, the great wise architect within, begins the monumental task of reorganization. It dismantles the old, rickety structures of the ego, the false beliefs, the outdated identities, the borrowed ambitions, to make way for something new, something true. I came to learn, through the works of the great explorers of the inner world, that this soul fatigue can take many forms. I recognized myself in all of them. First, there was the fatigue of misalignment. My passion for architecture, once a roaring fire, had dwindled to a pilot light. I was no longer creating from a place of joy, but from a place of obligation, chasing accolades and contracts that fed my ego but starved my spirit. My body was heavy because I was carrying the weight of a life that was not my own. Then I felt the deep, cold ache of unmourned grief. Years ago, I had walked away from a chance to live a simpler life, to work with my hands, to build small, honest things in a quiet place. I had chosen prestige instead, and I had never allowed myself to truly grieve the path not taken. I had simply powered through, burying the loss under a mountain of work. Now, in the silence, that grief was resurfacing, demanding to be felt. The third fatigue was one of emotional overload. My life was a constant barrage of information, notifications, and demands. I was perpetually connected to the world but deeply disconnected from myself. My nervous system was fried, my emotional circuits blown. My soul was withdrawing energy simply to protect itself from the relentless noise. I also recognized the fatigue of transition. I was standing on a threshold, though I hadn't consciously known it. The Elias, the architect I had so carefully curated, was dying, and the person I was becoming had not yet been born. This in-between space, this liminal state, is incredibly energy-intensive. It requires a shedding of an old skin, and that is exhausting work. Finally, I felt the crushing weight of blocked creativity. The true artist in me, the one who wanted to sketch for the love of form, to design a home that felt like a poem rather than a statement, had been silenced. I had commodified my gift. My soul was protesting this deep betrayal by refusing to provide the energy for its continued exploitation. The body's heaviness, I finally understood, was not my enemy. It was my most loyal guide. It was a compass pointing me back to myself, revealing the deep tectonic shifts happening in my inner architecture. This period of stillness was not an empty void. It was the subconscious's workshop. Here, in the quiet, my soul was taking the raw, painful material of my life, the disappointments, the compromises, the grief, and was slowly, patiently reshaping it into wisdom. It was turning the tangled mess of my confusion into the clear, strong thread of a new purpose. This stillness was an invitation to a conversation, an inner dialogue that had been long overdue. As I lay there, I began to ask the three sacred questions my soul had been waiting for. First, I asked, what am I protecting myself from? The answer rose not in words, but in a feeling, a deep knowing. I was protecting myself from the terrifying vulnerability of living authentically. I was protecting myself from the potential judgment of others if I stepped off the prescribed path of success. I was protecting myself from the quiet, gnawing fear that even if I achieved everything I thought I wanted, I would still feel empty. The fatigue was a fortress, a way to stop playing a game I was afraid of losing, and even more afraid of winning. Then, I asked, what in my life no longer serves my growth? The list was long and painful. My relentless ambition, my need for external validation, the prestigious job that felt like a gilded cage, the relationships that were based on my professional identity rather than my true self, my fear of silence. Each one felt like a heavy stone I had been carrying in a sack on my back. Finally, with a trembling heart, I asked the most important question. Which version of me is longing to be born? An image floated into my mind. It was a simpler version of me. A man with dirt on his hands and sawdust in his hair. A man whose shoulders were not hunched with the weight of expectation, but relaxed. A man who measured his day not in billable hours, but in the satisfaction of a well-made joint or a line drawn with pure inspiration. He was quieter, slower, but infinitely more alive. He was the man I had abandoned years ago. He was waiting to be reclaimed. In that moment, I understood the sacred paradox of doing nothing. To the frantic outer ego, my weeks on the couch looked like failure, like apathy, like giving up. But in the grand, mysterious economy of the soul, it was the most productive time of my life. When the outer ego finally falls silent, the inner self can begin its true work. The noise of the world fades, and you can finally hear the deeper rhythms of your own being. Slowly, gently, after a long season of inner winter, the energy began to return. It did not come back as a tidal wave of the old frantic drive. It was not the caffeine-fueled, anxiety-tinged energy of my past. It was different. It was a calm, clear river, flowing from a deep underground spring. It was wiser, it was calmer, it was authentic. It was an energy that didn't demand I conquer the world, but invited me to participate in it with intention and grace. I learned to rise slowly. The old me would have leaped out of bed, immediately checking emails, already 5 steps ahead in the day's race. The new me honored the transition from the dream world to the waking one. I honored the body that had so patiently guided me home. I began to make small changes. I resigned from my high-pressure firm. I started sketching again, just for me. I took long walks with no destination. I was not building skyscrapers anymore. I was rebuilding a life, my life, from the foundation up. So if you feel that gravity, that profound pull towards stillness, I urge you not to fight it. Do not label it as laziness or weakness. See it for what it is, a sacred summons from your soul. It is a sign that the life you have been living has become too small for the person you are becoming. Rest is not the opposite of growth. It is the rich, dark soil where growth takes root. To honor the call to lie down is not to give up. It is to choose wisdom. It is to finally, courageously, step into the true and holy rhythm of your own soul. It is the beginning of everything.